Hello, everybody. If you can hear me, will you please press yes into the comments? Hi, everybody. Please comment yes if you can hear me. Please comment yes into the comments. Yay, you can hear me. Great. Well, hi, everybody. As you know, my name's Haley, and I'm super excited today to present to you Sarah Kaplan, who is a science reporter for the Washington Post. It's one of the biggest newspapers in the United States, and she's here today to talk to you about how she researches global issues. And she's very excited to talk to you today. Fun fact about Sarah, she loves Harry Potter. So that you're allowed to ask questions about that too. I'm gonna just go ahead and let Sarah start talking. So here you are, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet all of you over, oops. Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet all of you over the internet. I hope you can hear me. So as Haley said, I'm a science reporter at the Washington Post. I write about everything from, space to bacteria to things that happen in government that have to do with science. And lately I've been really interested in, right now if you talk to a lot of scientists in the United States, they feel like science needs to be defended because some of the people in government right now are not, don't agree with the scientific consensus on issues like global climate change, which I know Haley said you guys have done research on. Other things are like vaccines to prevent disease. And so there's a lot of sort of tumult and controversy in the community right now. And I was interested in looking at examples of people who are part of the scientific community, like they're researchers or they're teachers, and they work with folks who maybe are kind of skeptical. And how do you cross that divide? How do you get people to have conversations that, maybe they're reluctant to have? So I was interested in the state called Idaho, which is in the western part of the United States. It's a very rural and mountainous state, so lots of people there live really close to nature. They live in the forests. A lot of them work in industries that have to do with nature, like they're farmers or they are loggers and they cut down trees. But also a lot of people there don't believe that climate change is a real issue. Some of them maybe think that climate change is happening, but don't think that we should be worried about it. Some of them think that it's not happening at all. And so I knew that this was sort of what I was interested. This is like my research topic, right? And I had to figure out, okay, where is a story that I can tell about the state? Who are the people who are doing something interesting? And so I started out, you kind of cast a wide net and then you narrow in. So I started out by reaching out to some of the top climate change researchers in Idaho. I spoke with someone who runs the climate change program at the university there and asked, like, who do you know who's doing something interesting about outreach and communication? And he put me in touch with a few people and one of them was this high school teacher named Jamie Essler. And Jamie runs a really amazing program for his students where he takes them out into, into nature, basically. Like they go up into the mountains and into the forest and they canoe on the lake and they do research on the way climate change is affecting their community. And the man from the university said, "Oh, you should talk to Jamie. He's like a really good, he's a really good teacher, and he's really interesting, and he's doing some interesting stuff with the students." So then I went online, I went on Google, and I looked up Jamie Essler, and I saw that he was, I read some newspaper reports about him because he was named Idaho's Teacher of the Year a couple of years ago. So there were some articles about him. I also looked at his website on his school, or his school's website. He has a web page there, and I read that, and he talked about what he, what kind of work he did. And then I called Jamie up, and I talked with him for a little while. That's part of, especially as a reporter, a lot of your research is talking to people, and trying to, and hearing what they have to say. And so by the end of my conversation with Jamie, I knew he was the person I wanted to write about. He was really interesting. But I wanted to make sure that I wasn't, just going with the first thing that I heard, that I had sort of a more comprehensive look at what was going on in the state. So I also reached out to a group for science educators in the state who teach climate change. And so this is like, if Jamie is one person, this group represents hundreds of teachers. And I called them and I said, I'm interested in writing this story. Is there anyone else that you think I should know about, or is Jamie the right person to be focused on? And luckily they were like, yes, Jamie's perfect. He's the kind of person you want to write about. So it wound up working out. But had they said, no, actually, I think you have a really interesting case in this different city in a different part of the state, maybe I would have, done some more research, called up that teacher and asked them some questions, and then tried to figure out who better represents the story that I'm trying to tell. And I wanted to show you guys, I'm not going to make you read the article because you guys can read that on your own, but I wanted to show you some pictures from the, I'm not really sure how to do this because I'm not a very high-tech person. But I wanted to show you some pictures from the article that I wound up writing. I hope you guys can see this. This is the story. And I went to Idaho and with this group, and they were doing a field trip where they were looking at trees and measuring how much carbon was stored in the trees. And so it was really cool to sort of see this in action and see the students learning about the natural world. So like you can see, here's like some of the math they were doing, and there's pictures of the students measuring trees. This is Jamie, the teacher. And let's see here, oops, sorry. Here's another student, and the boy that you see who's sort of looking up, he's got his eye in a instrument. He actually, at the end of the project, he went up to his teacher and he said, I think I'm beginning to understand the enormity of the problem of climate change, because they were looking at like how many trees would you need to plant to take all the carbon out of the atmosphere that you put into it by driving a car. And he saw the number, it was a really big number. And he's like, okay, I think I understand why climate, how hard it is to address an issue like climate change. Oopsie, okay. So that was basically like what I was going to talk about. I'm more interested in your questions. So I guess Haley has a bunch of them.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing about your project. It sounds super interesting. And I see that Janelle says that she's noticed the same thing in Kentucky about climate change. I just wanted to check in again. If you can't hear or there's something wrong, we will share this again, the recording, if you've got some internet issues now. So for those of you who have questions for Sarah about her work or her presentation, please comment them into the live chat box. I will start reading those questions and Sarah will start answering them. The first question that we have here is actually from Miriam, and I feel so bad she can't hear right now, but we will record this and share it with her. She asked Sarah, why are you so interested in science? Why do you choose this subject in particular? And then if you could solve one global issue, what issue would you choose to solve? So I'm going to send this back to Sarah now. Okay, there you go, Sarah.
If I could solve one global issue, it's a hard one. I'll answer the easy question first, which is why am I interested in science? I really like reporting on science because as a journalist, I'm curious. I want to know why things are happening, what is happening and why it's happening. Why do people do the things they do? Why does the world look the way we see it? And I think that that is the same question that scientists are asking. You know, a journalist might see a flood happening in a region and say, like, why is this river flooding? And why hasn't the government done anything to prevent this river from flooding and destroying people's homes? And a scientist is asking, you know, slightly different questions, but sort of the same thing, like what is the weather that's happening and what are the dynamics of the system that causes this flood? And how can we prevent it? How can we keep people safe? And I think there's something really satisfying about understanding this, like, you know, the problems that are at the root of things. So like understanding people get sick. If you understand the biology of the bacteria that causes that sickness, that's one of the first steps to solving the problem, to preventing it. And so I really like that. I also just like, you know, the world is really amazing. It's full of interesting, weird things. I love learning about space and all of the like strange planets in our own solar system. I love learning about creatures that have gone extinct and like all of the weird characteristics that they had that, you know, would seem totally alien to us now. And even animals alive today, like if you look at pictures of animals in the deep ocean, they just look like aliens. They look like something somebody made up for a scary movie. So I really enjoy that, and just learning something new every day. I think that there are a lot of beats in journalism can be pretty disheartening because so much of it is about conflict and people people being in, you know, if you're in politics or business or something, it's so much of it is people putting their own interests first and fighting and science. I mean, there's still politics in science, and there are still people who have big egos and don't want to admit they're wrong or, you know, refuse to help other scientists. But that's usually not the case. Most of the time, I find scientists really great to work with, and their work is really interesting to report on. Is there a global problem? I mean, climate change. If I knew the answer to that, if we could find a way to have on this earth and using the resources we need to use to have the lifestyles we want to have, but not have it negatively affect the planet, that would be great.
Sarah, thank you for sharing on that question. We've got a bunch more questions for you, so I'm going to start reading some more. The first one, and I'm just going to stay online here. What did you major in college, and does that help your work? That's a question from Minu. Yeah.
So actually, I studied the Middle East in college. I studied Arabic, and I majored in international culture and politics. And And even though I don't work in the Middle East, and I don't have that many opportunities to talk to people or use my Arabic, it's really bad now. I think that one of the main, for being a journalist, regardless of what you're reporting on, you need to be curious and you need to be able to see things from other people's point of view. And so I lived in Egypt for a few months, and living in another country, as like I'm sure many of you know, or even just talking to people from other countries, that changes your perspective, that makes you see things in a new way. And I find that useful all the time. Also, I think that Arabic is a really hard and interesting language. Like it was such it really stretched my brain to study a different language other than English. And so hopefully it made me smarter. I don't know if it did, but I think that, it makes you think differently and it makes you aware of different perspectives.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay, we've got two more from, I'm going to combine these questions, one from Sarah and one from Shahad, which are, what is the hardest thing about doing research, and what's the most important thing in doing research to make sure your sources are perfect? And actually, that's one more from Fatima. How do you make sure that your source is 100% true and not just made up?
Those are really good questions. The hardest thing about doing research is actually what those second questions are, is how do you make sure you can trust your sources? Because you can't always, especially, everyone has, everyone, including a journalist, I'm not perfect either. We all have biases. We all have, points that we're trying to make. And we all want to present ourselves in a good light. And you have to be conscious of that when I do my reporting. So if a scientist says, this study is perfect, it's brilliant, it's going to change the world, and everyone has to rewrite their textbooks, I have to think, like, why is this person saying it? Are they saying it because they think it's totally true, or are they saying it because they have a vested interest in saying it? And the best way, you can't make sure any one particular source is perfect, because nobody will be. But what you can do is you can verify their account by talking to other people. And so when I write about a study, I'll always interview scientists who weren't involved in the study and say, what do you think about this? Are there any problems that you see? What do you think the implications are? Do you agree with the scientist's interpretation of their results? And you would do the same thing no matter what subject you're covering. So if I was a politician, or if I was covering politics, and I talked to a politician who was like, this law is the best law, and it's going to make everything better for everyone's lives, I wouldn't just take his word for it, or her word for it. I might call up another politician and ask her, what do you think about this? Like, is this person exaggerating or lying? And if you talk to enough sources and you can get different perspectives, then that's the best way to make sure that you're trying to accurately represent what's, or that you get something closer to the truth.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Okay, we've got a bunch more questions, so I'm going to kind of give you a couple at a time. The first is from Mason. Do you think the United States will ever switch from coal and oil to renewable energy? So for clean energy. He's from Vermont, and he can already see this happening. He's super excited. He'd love to know if you think it'll happen in other places. Hassan says, Sarah, is there a particular global issue that affects your job? And then Masha says, what's the most interesting thing about your job? So first is renewable energy. Second, is there a global issue that affects your job? And third, what's the most interesting thing?
Yeah, I think that we're seeing already a lot of traditional fossil fuels are not, it's just an economics question, right? Like, some fossil fuels are not as affordable as they used to be, and alternatives are becoming more affordable. And so I think especially you see less coal now and more natural gas, which is, still that still has its own set of concerns associated with it, but it's less, maybe it causes different damage or less damage to the environment. And then also things like wind and solar are becoming less expensive. So I do think, I can't see the future, so I don't know if we'll ever become a completely renewable, or we'll ever get all of our energy from renewable sources. But definitely it seems like we are getting more of it from renewable sources than we have been in the past. And we'll probably keep moving in that direction. Sorry, I've already forgotten the second question. Is there a global problem that affects my job? Is that the, okay, yeah. So, I don't know that there's like a problem that affects my ability to do my job every day. My job is shaped by global problems. Like I said, if climate change wasn't an issue, I would be writing about totally different stories. Like climate change is a huge topic that I cover. I also cover a lot of stories about disease and like diseases that we get from animals, or antibiotic resistance. I don't, if you guys know what that is. That's like, because we use so many antibiotics to prevent bacterial infections, the bacteria are actually evolving to be able to overcome those antibiotics. And there's a concern that someday we might not be able to use antibiotics anymore to treat sickness, which is like really, really concerning. And that's a global problem that I find myself writing about. So I don't know, when I sit down at my desk and type into my computer and interview people, what I'm writing about and who I'm talking to is totally shaped by what's going on in the world. And
Sarah, I have to say thank you. Amir actually just asked, do you think we'll win our war against evolving bacteria and create new antibiotics? So it's funny that you just answered that question. I'm gonna just put a few more questions in. So Aram asks, as a journalist, have you ever faced problems talking with people? Did anyone get aggressive? How did you deal with that? And then Kate asks, how do you keep a positive perspective on the possibilities of developing science worldwide when there are skeptics and politics in science? So I'm going to leave those with you.
Wait, sorry, what was the first question again?
You're good. Sorry, I know I'm moving fast. The first is interviewing people who maybe get aggressive.
Okay, yeah. I talked to a lot of people who have a lot of preconceived notions about journalists or bad interactions with journalists in the past. And it's really, it's really hard. It's hard to get people to trust you, especially because this is their story, this is their life. And that's a precious thing. And I feel like I always try to be as respectful and grateful that anyone will share their story with me as I can be. But I have, there are people who say, I was interviewed in the past and that person, they didn't get my story right, or they misquoted me or something. And I can't say, I can't promise them that they're going to be happy with my story, but I can promise them that I will give them, the full opportunity to explain themselves and their perspective. And the way to prove that, prove that you are worth talking to, is to be a good listener. And so, sometimes it's as basic as like, tell me, what do you think is important? What am I missing? What should I understand? Asking questions like that let people know that you're really interested in hearing from them. You're not just trying to sort of project your own opinion onto them, or, trick them into saying something. So I think that, that's always a good question to ask when you're talking to anyone for research, is like, what is important to you? if someone reads my article or my report, what should they understand? And then for the other question about, man, I'm already forgetting that too. I'm really sorry, Haley.
No problem, Sarah. So this question, and we have a couple different versions of this question, is how do you stay positive when there's so many difficult things and people who oppose science? Yeah, so I'm going to let you answer that one. And I know we have 5 minutes left, so everybody, we're going to get through as many of your questions as we can. Thank you for sharing all your questions with Sarah. Okay, go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, it can be tough to stay positive, especially when there are things that I find really, if someone tells me they don't believe in evolution, that's one I find really hard because evolution is so important to our understanding of biology. You can't answer any other questions in biology until you understand the process of evolution. And so, yeah, and I don't know how to respond to that because it's evidence, and we see evidence of evolution happening all the time. I mean, you can see, there's all these stories. There's a famous story about these moths in a forest, and the trees had white bark. And so the moths were white because that allowed them to blend in with the trees. And when this was in England, and so England was really industrial, and there's a lot of smoke coming out of smokestacks, and it turned the trees black because there's all this soot. And the moths turned black too, so that they would camouflage. And that was evolution by natural selection. The white moths died out, and the black moths took over. There's millions of examples of that happening all over the world. Evolution that happens in our lifespans before our eyes, and people are still skeptical. That I don't know how to convince them other than to say, to keep telling stories that are fascinating and true. And if you can, maybe I can't change someone's mind, but I can open someone's mind, right? I can, if a kid is reading an amazing story about a really cool animal that evolved to have this really amazing behavior, maybe that will make them really excited about science and willing to trust and respect the findings that scientists have reached over centuries of work. And so I just see my job as opening people's minds to how cool and relevant science is, and trying to tell those stories. And I'm not going to reach everyone, but if I can reach a couple of people, then I'll consider that a success.
Sarah, I think that's an excellent place to start closing out our conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your answers to all these questions and talking about your job a little bit. Guys, I think this is a great example of tackling global issues through journalism. Sarah works on all of these issues and helps change minds and spread information about science around the world. So that is definitely one way to tackle global issues. Thank you all for your questions. I know you have a lot of questions, and I'll see, maybe Sarah and I can talk and answer some of the rest of them later on, and we can share them with you. Thank you all, and I see you're all thanking Sarah. So Sarah, we've got lots of positive feedback. So yeah, thank you guys for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of Module 2. Bye guys.
Bye.
Bye everybody. Okay, bye-bye.